Roger Waters, MOCKS, Ozzy Osbourne's death, and leaves fans furious. The music world erupted in outrage on September 2, 2025, when a video surfaced of Pink Floyd's Roger Waters making callous and dismissive comments about the recently deceased Ozzy Osbourne. Just 6 weeks after the Prince of Darkness had passed away following his battle with Parkinson's disease, Waters chose to launch an unprovoked attack on the heavy metal legend's legacy, sparking one of the most vicious backlashes in rock history. The controversy began during what should have been a routine interview with The Independent Inc. podcast, recorded in late August but only recently published. Waters, now 81 years old and increasingly known more for his controversial political statements than his musical contributions, had been discussing how pop culture figures allegedly distract from important political issues when he made the fateful decision to target Ozzy Osbourne's memory. "How can we push this to one side? I know how to do it. We'll do it with Taylor Swift or Bubblegum or Kim Kardashian's bum," Waters had said, role-playing as some unnamed person of power. Then, switching out of character with a sneer that viewers would later describe as genuinely malicious, he continued, "Or Ozzy Osbourne, who just died, bless him, in his whatever state that he was in his whole life, we'll never know. Although, he was all over the TV for hundreds of years with his idiocy and nonsense. If you're as shocked by these comments as the rest of the music world, please consider leaving a like to support coverage of this developing story. Your engagement helps us bring you the latest on this explosive controversy." But Waters wasn't finished. In what can only be described as a deliberate character assassination of a man who couldn't defend himself, the former Pink Floyd bassist continued his tirade. "The music, I have no idea. I couldn't give a fuck. I don't care about Black Sabbath. I never did. I have no interest in biting the heads of chickens or whatever they do. I couldn't care less, you know." When the interviewer gently corrected him that it had been a bat, not a chicken, that Ozzy had famously bitten during his 1982 concert, Waters' response revealed the depth of his contempt. "That's even worse, isn't it? I don't know. Is it worse to bite the head off a bat or a chicken?" The interview might have passed unnoticed, lost among Waters' increasingly frequent controversial statements, but someone leaked clips to social media on September 1st. Within hours, the hashtag Roger Waters disgrace was trending worldwide, with metalheads, rock fans, and even casual music listeners expressing their shock and disgust at the timing and tone of Waters' comments. The first major response came from the Osbourne family themselves. Jack Osbourne, Ozzy's son, posted a blistering response on his Instagram stories that would be screenshot and shared millions of times across all platforms. "Hey Roger Waters, fuck you. How pathetic and out of touch you've become. The only way you seem to get attention these days is by vomiting out bullshit in the press. My father always thought you were a cunt. Thanks for proving him right." The post, accompanied by a clown emoji and the hashtag #JohnFuckRogerWaters, represented one of the most direct and profanity-laden responses ever made by a member of the famously outspoken Osbourne family. Within minutes, it had been liked by thousands of verified accounts from across the music industry, including members of Metallica, Iron Maiden, and surprisingly, several former Pink Floyd collaborators. The irony of Waters' attack wasn't lost on anyone who knew the history between the two musicians. Ozzy had been a lifelong Pink Floyd fan, frequently citing them as one of his major influences. In a 2004 Rolling Stone interview, he had called Money one of his favorite rock songs of all time and had praised Pink Floyd's entire catalogue, saying they never made a bad album. He had particularly championed the soundtrack album Obscured by Clouds, often telling interviewers that it was criminally underrated. The saddest part, posted music journalist John Wiederhorn on Twitter, is that Ozzy spent his life praising Pink Floyd, while Waters has apparently harbored decades of resentment toward Black Sabbath. This says everything about the character of both men. Indeed, Waters' animosity toward Black Sabbath dated back to 1970, when he had reviewed their debut single, Evil Woman, for a music publication. His review at the time had been scathing. Well, I'm speechless. Well, almost. You keep thinking it's going to start. You think that for the first minute, but then, if you are really perceptive, you realize it isn't going to start, and that's all there is. But that 1970 review, written by a young musician critiquing his contemporaries, was vastly different from the 2025 attack on a recently deceased legend. The timing, just 6 weeks after Ozzy's death, struck many as particularly cruel and opportunistic. Sharon Osbourne, who had remained relatively quiet on social media since her husband's passing, broke her silence with a statement that was both dignified and devastating. "My husband spent 57 years bringing joy, catharsis, and hope to millions of people around the world. He battled his demons publicly, never pretending to be perfect, always trying to be better. For someone to attack his memory while his family is still grieving shows a level of cowardice and cruelty that I didn't think existed in our industry," the statement continued. Ozzy admired Pink Floyd's music his entire life. He would have been heartbroken to know that his respect wasn't mutual, but he also would have laughed at the idea that someone was so threatened by his legacy that they felt the need to attack him after death. Rock and roll will remember who showed grace and who showed smallness. The music industry's response was swift and unanimous. Tony Iommi, Ozzy's longtime Black Sabbath bandmate, posted a rare social media statement. Roger's comments show he understands neither Ozzy's music nor his impact. Ozzy created joy in darkness, hope in despair. That's something Roger clearly can't comprehend. Metallica's James Hetfield was more direct. Without Black Sabbath, there would be no Metallica. Without Ozzy, there would be no heavy metal as we know it. Roger Waters can keep his prog rock pretensions. We'll take Ozzy's honesty and power any day. Even musicians from outside the metal world condemned Waters' comments. Sir Paul McCartney, who rarely involves himself in industry controversies, posted, "Music should unite us, especially in times of mourning. There's no excuse for such cruelty toward a fellow artist's memory." The backlash extended far beyond musicians. Fans began sharing stories of how Ozzy's music had helped them through difficult times, using the hashtag #OzzyHelped. Mental health advocates pointed out that Ozzy had been open about his struggles with addiction and mental illness, helping to destigmatize these issues for countless fans. Dr. Susan Chen, a music therapist who had worked with several heavy metal musicians, told Rolling Stone, "Ozzy's willingness to be vulnerable, to admit his mistakes and struggles, has probably saved more lives than Roger Waters will ever know. To mock that vulnerability after death is not just cruel, it's destructive to the very idea that artists can help heal through honesty." The controversy deepened when old footage surfaced of Waters making similar dismissive comments about other deceased musicians. In a 2019 interview, he had made snide remarks about Kurt Cobain, and in 2021, he had dismissed the entire grunge movement as noise for angry teenagers. A pattern was emerging of a man who seemed to derive pleasure from diminishing the achievements of artists who had connected with audiences in ways he never could. Music historian Martin Popoff provided context that many found illuminating. Roger Waters was always the most political and intellectually pretentious member of Pink Floyd. But there's a difference between artistic ambition and basic human decency. What he's done here isn't artistic critique, it's grave dancing, and it reveals more about his own insecurities than it does about Ozzy's legacy. The financial implications of Waters' comments became apparent when several major music festivals began removing Pink Floyd songs from their playlists in solidarity with the Osbourne family. Streaming numbers for Waters' solo work plummeted by 60% in the week following the controversy, while Black Sabbath and Ozzy's solo catalogue saw a massive surge in plays. More damaging to Waters' reputation was the response from his own industry peers. David Gilmour, his longtime Pink Floyd bandmate, with whom he'd had a notoriously difficult relationship, made a rare public statement. "Whatever our personal differences, I always respected Roger's artistry. But there's no artistry in attacking the dead. There's only cruelty." Even Waters' political allies began to distance themselves. Progressive activists, who had previously supported his various causes, started questioning whether they wanted to be associated with someone capable of such callousness. "You can't claim to fight for human dignity while showing such contempt for a grieving family," wrote one prominent left-wing commentator. The controversy took on international dimensions when Birmingham City Council, where both Ozzy and Tony Iommi were born, announced they were removing Pink Floyd songs from all city-sponsored events until Mr. Waters shows the basic respect that our city's musical heroes deserve. The Lord Mayor of Birmingham issued a statement calling Waters' comments an insult to one of Birmingham's greatest cultural ambassadors. Mental health organizations that had worked with Ozzy during his battles with addiction and Parkinson's disease also weighed in. The Parkinson's Foundation, which had benefited from Ozzy's advocacy and fundraising efforts in his final years, issued a statement condemning any attempt to mock or diminish someone's struggle with this devastating disease. The National Alliance on Mental Illness went further, pointing out that Ozzy's openness about his mental health struggles had encouraged thousands of people to seek help. To mock that courage is to mock everyone who has ever struggled with mental illness, their statement read. As the controversy entered its second week, more damaging details began to emerge about Waters' interview. Sources close to the production revealed that Waters had specifically requested to discuss Ozzy during the interview, suggesting that his comments weren't spontaneous but premeditated. He came in with notes, one crew member told TMZ anonymously. He was excited about the opportunity to tear down Ozzy's reputation. It was honestly disturbing to watch. The revelation that Waters had planned his attack made the backlash even more severe. If his comments had been spontaneous, they could have been dismissed as an elderly man having a bad day. But the premeditated nature of the assault on Ozzy's memory suggested something far more malicious. Kelly Osbourne, who had initially remained silent while her brother Jack took the lead in defending their father, finally spoke out with a series of posts that went viral immediately. "My dad spent his last years advocating for Parkinson's research, trying to help other families facing this disease. He raised millions of dollars and brought awareness to a condition that desperately needed both." Roger Waters took the opportunity of his death to score cheap points in some imaginary culture war. The difference in character couldn't be more clear. The entertainment industry's response continued to escalate. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where both Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath are enshrined, issued an unprecedented statement distancing themselves from Waters' comments while celebrating Ozzy's legacy. Several major music publications announced they would no longer cover Waters' political activities, focusing solely on his musical contributions when necessary. Perhaps most significantly, several musicians who had previously collaborated with Waters on various projects began publicly severing ties. Roger Daltrey of The who had worked with Waters on various charity projects, announced he would no longer participate in any events featuring the Pink Floyd bassist. "There are lines you don't cross," Daltrey said simply. The psychological impact on Waters himself became apparent when he failed to appear at several scheduled events in the weeks following the controversy. Sources close to him reported that he was shocked by the intensity of the backlash and was reconsidering future public appearances. His management team began cancelling interviews and public appearances, citing scheduling conflicts. Meanwhile, the Osbourne family received an outpouring of support that seemed to grow stronger each day. Tributes to Ozzy's memory flooded social media, with fans sharing videos of his performances, stories of his kindness, and testimonials about how his music had helped them through difficult times. The contrast couldn't have been starker. While Waters faced universal condemnation for his cruelty, Ozzy's legacy was being celebrated more passionately than ever. Radio stations around the world began playing marathon Black Sabbath and Ozzy solo sets. Several tribute concerts were hastily organized, with proceeds going to Parkinson's research in Ozzy's honor. 3 weeks after the initial controversy, Waters' representatives finally issued what many considered a half-hearted apology. Mr. Waters regrets that his comments were taken out of context and caused distress to the Osbourne family during their time of grief. The statement notably didn't apologize for the comments themselves, only for how they were received. The response to the non-apology was immediate and brutal. Jack Osbourne posted simply, "Fuck your non-apology. You meant every word." The sentiment was echoed across social media, with fans and fellow musicians alike rejecting what they saw as a face-saving exercise rather than genuine remorse. The financial consequences for Waters continued to mount. His upcoming solo tour saw ticket sales plummet, with several venues reporting refund requests exceeding 70%. Merchandise sales collapsed, and his publishing company reported that sync licensing requests for his music had virtually disappeared as advertisers and filmmakers avoided association with the controversy. More telling was the response from younger musicians who had previously cited Pink Floyd as an influence. Many began specifically distinguishing between the band's music and Waters' personal character, with some going so far as to dedicate songs to Ozzy's memory while explicitly rejecting Waters' legacy. Greta Van Fleet, often criticized for their Led Zeppelin influences, made headlines when they announced they were recording a cover of Iron Man in Ozzy's honor. "We'd rather be inspired by someone who admitted his flaws and tried to grow than someone who attacks the dead," lead singer Josh Kiska said. The controversy also highlighted generational differences in how musicians and fans viewed legacy and respect. Older musicians, regardless of genre, seemed universally appalled by Waters' comments, while younger artists used the incident to discuss toxic behavior in the music industry. "This isn't about musical taste," explained 25-year-old singer-songwriter Phoebe Bridgers, who had never previously commented on metal music. "This is about basic human decency. You don't attack someone's memory while their family is grieving. That's not artistic criticism. It's just cruelty." As the controversy entered its fourth week, it became clear that Waters had fundamentally miscalculated both the public mood and the level of respect that Ozzy commanded across all musical genres. His attempt to diminish Ozzy's legacy had instead amplified it, while severely damaging his own reputation in the process. Music industry analysts began predicting that the controversy would have lasting implications for Waters' career and legacy. "He's basically ended his relevance," one industry insider told Variety. "Pink Floyd's music will survive because of Gilmour, Wright, and Mason, but Waters personally may never recover from this." The incident also sparked broader conversations about aging rockers and their relationship with newer generations of musicians. Several think pieces explored whether Waters' comments reflected a broader resentment among some older artists toward musicians who had achieved different kinds of success or cultural impact. "There's always been tension between art rock and metal, between intellectual pretension and emotional honesty," wrote Robert Christgau in a widely shared essay. But what Waters did here crossed the line from artistic disagreement into personal cruelty. It revealed someone more concerned with his own intellectual superiority than with basic human compassion. As October 2025 began, 6 weeks after the initial controversy, the music world had largely moved on from Roger Waters. His upcoming projects remained in limbo, his tour was hemorrhaging ticket sales, and his political activism had been overshadowed by questions about his character. Meanwhile, Ozzy's legacy continued to grow stronger. The Ozzy Osbourne Foundation for Parkinson's Research, established by Sharon in her husband's memory, had raised over $5 million in the months since his death. Multiple tribute albums were in production, and Birmingham had announced plans for a permanent memorial to their most famous musical son. The final word seemed to belong to Tony Iommi, who had remained largely quiet throughout the controversy, but finally issued a statement that perfectly captured the mood of the music world. "Ozzy spent his life bringing people together through music. Even in death, he's united more people than Roger Waters ever did in life. That tells you everything you need to know about both men." The Roger Waters controversy had revealed the true measure of Ozzy Osbourne's impact on music and culture. By attacking him, Waters had inadvertently reminded the world why the Prince of Darkness had been so beloved. His honesty, his vulnerability, his willingness to connect with people through shared pain and hope. In the end, Waters' attempt to diminish Ozzy's legacy had achieved the opposite. It had shown the music world the difference between artistic pretension and authentic connection, between intellectual superiority and emotional truth, between someone who preached about human dignity and someone who actually lived it. The controversy would be remembered not for what it revealed about Ozzy Osbourne, his legacy was secure, but for what it revealed about Roger Waters. In attacking a dead man, he had revealed the poverty of his own character and the hollowness of his claims to moral authority. The Prince of Darkness was gone, but his light burned brighter than ever. Roger Waters, meanwhile, had shown himself to be exactly what Jack Osbourne had called him: pathetic, out of touch, and desperately seeking attention through the diminishment of better men. The music world had rendered its verdict, and it was unanimous. Roger Waters had disgraced himself, while Ozzy Osbourne's memory remained untouchable, elevated above controversy by the genuine love and respect of millions of fans who recognized authentic artistry when they heard it. But the story didn't end there. As November 2025 approached, new developments continued to emerge that further cemented the damage to Waters' reputation, while simultaneously strengthening Ozzy's legacy. The most significant blow came when former Pink Floyd drummer Nick Mason, who had remained diplomatically neutral throughout most of the band's internal conflicts over the decades, made a rare public statement distancing himself from his former bandmates' comments. Roger has always been passionate about his beliefs, but there's a difference between passion and cruelty, Mason said during a BBC radio interview. What he said about Ozzy crossed a line that I never thought any of us would cross. Music should heal, not hurt. Mason's statement was particularly damaging because he had been the one Pink Floyd member who had maintained relationships with all the others, serving as a diplomatic bridge during their most contentious periods. His willingness to publicly criticize Waters signaled that the bassist had truly isolated himself from even his oldest musical partnerships. The controversy took another turn when investigative music journalists began digging deeper into Waters' history of public statements about other artists. What they found painted a picture of a man with a pattern of attacking musicians who had achieved commercial success that he felt was undeserved. Music journalist David Fricker uncovered a 1985 interview where Waters had dismissed Madonna as vapid nonsense for teenage girls, a 1993 radio appearance where he had called Nirvana noise for the nihilistic generation, and a 2007 podcast where he had suggested that hip-hop wasn't real music. The pattern revealed someone who consistently positioned himself as an arbiter of artistic worth, while dismissing genres and artists that connected with audiences in ways his solo work never had. It's not about musical taste, explained Dr. Robert Walser, a musicologist at UCLA who specialized in popular music studies. This is about a man who can't accept that artistic value isn't determined by intellectual complexity. Ozzy's music connected with people on an emotional level that Waters' pretentious concept albums never could, and that clearly bothers him. The academic community's response to the controversy surprised many. Several universities that had previously included Waters' work in courses about progressive rock and concept albums began re-evaluating their curricula. Professor Sarah Hill at Cardiff University announced that her Politics and Popular Music course would no longer feature Waters' solo work, though Pink Floyd's music would remain. We can't separate the art from the artist when the artist consistently demonstrates such contempt for his fellow musicians and their grieving families, Professor Hill explained. Students need to understand that artistic pretension without human compassion is just empty intellectual masturbation. Meanwhile, the heavy metal community had rallied around Ozzy's memory in ways that surprised even longtime observers of the genre. The annual Metal Hammer Golden Gods Awards announced they were creating a new category, the Ozzy Osbourne Memorial Award for Courage in Music, to be given to artists who showed vulnerability and honesty in their work. The first recipient, announced posthumously, was Ozzy himself, but the award's criteria specifically mentioned artists who transform personal struggle into healing for others, a direct rebuke to Waters' suggestion that Ozzy's openness about his problems was mere idiocy and nonsense. Metallica's Lars Ulrich, presenting the award at the ceremony, made the connection explicit. Ozzy taught us that strength comes from admitting weakness, that power comes from showing vulnerability. That's something certain aging prog rockers will never understand. The financial ramifications for Waters continued to cascade through the industry. His longtime publishing company, Artemis Music, quietly began shopping his catalogue to other companies, with industry insiders reporting that they were looking to minimize association with his public statements. Several sync licensing deals for film and television were cancelled, with producers citing concerns about brand association. More personally devastating was the response from Waters' own family. His daughter, India Waters, a successful artist in her own right, posted a cryptic but pointed message on Instagram. Sometimes you have to choose between defending family and defending what's right. Today, I choose what's right. While she didn't mention the Ozzy controversy directly, the timing made her meaning clear. The international scope of the backlash became apparent when the BBC announced they were removing Waters from their upcoming documentary series, British Rock Legends, replacing his segment with an extended feature on Black Sabbath's influence on global music. The decision was particularly humiliating given Waters' long relationship with the BBC and his frequent appearances on their political programming. We felt it was inappropriate to platform someone who had shown such disrespect to a recently deceased British cultural icon, a BBC spokesperson explained. Our viewers expect better from the artists we feature. The controversy also sparked unexpected support for the Osbourne family from corners of the entertainment industry that had never previously engaged with heavy metal. Talk show host Stephen Colbert dedicated a segment of his show to defending Ozzy's legacy, calling Waters' comments the kind of intellectual snobbery that gives actual intelligence a bad name. Ozzy Osbourne brought joy to millions of people, Colbert said. Roger Waters brought, what? Pompous lectures about walls. I'll take the guy who admits he's crazy over the guy who thinks he's enlightened any day. The late-night television response was particularly damaging to Waters because it introduced the controversy to audiences who might never have heard of either musician, framing Waters as an out-of-touch elitist attacking a beloved cultural figure. As the controversy entered its third month, psychiatrists and grief counselors began weighing in on the psychological implications of Waters' behavior. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a specialist in grief counseling, told Psychology Today that attacking someone immediately after their death was one of the most psychologically aggressive acts possible. When someone dies, there's an almost universal human instinct to allow a period of mourning before criticism, Dr. Martinez explained. To violate that instinct suggests either profound psychological dysfunction or calculated cruelty. Either way, it reveals someone who lacks basic empathy. The clinical analysis of Waters' behavior added another layer to the public's understanding of why his comments had provoked such universal revulsion. It wasn't just about musical taste or industry politics. It was about fundamental human decency. The holiday season of 2025 brought the final, perhaps most symbolic blow to Waters' reputation. When the annual Christmas in Birmingham concert was announced, a charity event benefiting the Ozzy Osbourne Foundation for Parkinson's Research, the organizers made a point of stating that all musical genres are welcome to participate in honoring our city's greatest musical son. The statement was widely interpreted as a direct invitation to Pink Floyd members other than Waters. And indeed, David Gilmour surprised everyone by announcing he would perform a solo acoustic set featuring early Pink Floyd songs in memory of the music Ozzy loved. The gesture was seen as Gilmour's final separation from his former bandmate's toxicity. When the concert took place on December 22, 2025, exactly 5 months after Ozzy's death, it drew 80,000 people to Birmingham's Alexander Stadium. The lineup included everyone from Tony Iommi performing Black Sabbath classics to Ed Sheeran playing an acoustic version of Paranoid. The diversity of artists coming together to honor Ozzy's memory stood in stark contrast to Waters' isolation. The concert raised over $3 million for Parkinson's Research, with Sharon Osbourne noting in her closing remarks, "Ozzy always said that music should bring people together. Tonight proves he was right. Even in death, he's building bridges while others burn them." The final word on the controversy came from an unexpected source. Paul McCartney, who had initially offered only a brief condemnation of Waters' comments, gave a comprehensive interview to Rolling Stone, reflecting on the incident's broader implications for the music industry. "I've been in this business for 60 years, McCartney said. "I've seen artists at their best and worst, but I've never seen someone so deliberately cruel to a grieving family. What Roger did reveals a poverty of spirit that no amount of artistic pretension can disguise. Ozzy was loved because he was real. Roger is now reviled because he showed us something very ugly about himself." McCartney's words carried particular weight because of his status as one of the few musicians whose legacy rivaled both Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath's. His willingness to so thoroughly condemn Waters represented the final nail in the coffin of the bassist's reputation within the music community. As 2025 drew to a close, the full scope of the damage became clear. Waters had not only destroyed his own standing within the music industry, but had inadvertently created one of the most powerful tributes to Ozzy Osbourne's legacy in the process. The universal condemnation of his comments had reminded the world of everything that made Ozzy special: his honesty, his vulnerability, his ability to connect with people across all social and cultural boundaries. The final irony was perhaps the most devastating. In attempting to diminish Ozzy's cultural impact by calling his work idiocy and nonsense, Waters had prompted a global conversation about what truly matters in music. The answer, delivered by millions of fans, fellow musicians, and industry professionals, was unambiguous: authenticity, empathy, and the ability to help others feel less alone in their struggles. Roger Waters had spent decades positioning himself as Pink Floyd's intellectual conscience, the serious artist who elevated rock music beyond mere entertainment. But in the end, it was Ozzy Osbourne, the madman from Birmingham, who bit the heads off bats, who had demonstrated the higher human values of compassion, vulnerability, and genuine connection with others. The music world had learned a valuable lesson about the difference between intelligence and wisdom, between artistic sophistication and human depth. Waters might have been the more technically accomplished songwriter, but Ozzy had been the better human being. And in the end, that was what mattered most. If this shocking controversy has left you as outraged as the rest of the music world, please share this story and leave a like. The response to Waters' cruelty shows that music fans won't tolerate attacks on beloved artists, especially those who can no longer defend themselves. Ozzy's legacy deserves to be protected and celebrated, and the unified response to this attack proves that love and respect will always triumph over petty jealousy and calculated cruelty.